wondered what it's like suspended in space? Well, on this day in 1965, 30-year-old Russian cosmonaut Alexei Leonov took one giant float for mankind when he became the first person to walk in space. But the journey to getting there was not an easy one. This is the story of Soviets, Sputnik and space. So, let's begin at the beginning. After World War II, the USA and the USSR decided that they actually quite liked the feeling of being at war, but they didn't want the expense of an actual war, and thus the Cold War began. It was basically a competition to see if capitalism or communism was the best ideology. Spoiler, they're not. And also, who was going to be the leading global superpower? Honestly, the hubris to think that you could be the best superpower when flight and teleportation are right there. Anyway, one of the few good things to come out of this 40-something year bitch fest was the space race, where both nations tried to achieve as many space firsts as possible. The Soviet Union started really strong. They got the first satellite in space, Sputnik 1. They got the first dog in space, called Laika. The first person in space, Yuri Gagarin. And they also got the first woman in space, Valentina Tereshkova. And this annoyed the USA big time. They increased NASA spending by 500% because they needed everyone to know that capitalism was the best. It's not. So, after all of these firsts, it seemed only natural that the next first would be to send somebody beyond the capsule and outside into space. So who was Alexei Leonov, and why was he the chosen one? Well, he was born in Siberia in 1934. His dad was arrested and declared an enemy of the people during one of Stalin's purges when Alexei was only 2 years old. One of Alexei's first jobs was painting flowers on ovens to help support the family. God, I love olden days jobs. Anyway, his dad was eventually released and compensated for wrongful imprisonment, which I didn't think was an option, but I'm so glad that's how it panned out. Anyway, Alexei joined an Air Force flying school in Ukraine after finishing high school. He'd wanted to go to art school, but it was just too expensive. He graduated as a lieutenant in the parachute regiment in 1957. 3 years later, he was selected to be a part of the first cosmonaut training group along with 19 other people. He was told that he was under consideration for something new and very, very difficult. I would have been out right there. I want old and easy, please, like your mum. Don't. Anyway, Alexei and Pavel Balyev were selected to go on Vokshod 2, and their sole mission was to walk in space and get some sick selfies before the Americans could. Alexei's spacewalk lasted for 12 minutes. A 16-foot rope tethered him to the craft. He had a video camera on the airlock door and a stills camera attached to his chest to document the event. As he floated in space, he said that it made him feel like a grain of sand. But unfortunately, the awe was very short-lived as things went south almost immediately. Because of the vacuum of space, his spacesuit started to expand and it stiffened, so he couldn't actually take any photographs because he could barely move. The only sound that he could hear was his own laboured breathing. He got so hot that he almost got heat stroke from the exertion. His spacesuit was sloshing in sweat. His suit was so inflated that he wasn't able to re-enter the craft, which was a problem. His only choice was to open a valve and slowly depressurise his suit, which was dangerous because there was a very real possibility that it would leave him without enough oxygen to breathe. He then began to suffer from decompression sickness, or the bends you might have heard it called, which it can be deadly, and it's something that deep sea divers can suffer from if they return to the surface too quickly. Once Alexei had finally managed to get back into the spacecraft, the craft entered into a spin. Oxygen levels began to climb, putting them in danger of a catastrophic explosion. They finally managed to stabilise the craft, but then a failure in the automatic re-entry system meant that they had to manually re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. They veered wildly off course, finally landing in the Ural Mountains, far outside of the recovery area. The relief of having made it back to Earth alive must have been very short-lived because, unfortunately, they'd arrived in this very remote mountain range during a snowstorm. Oh, and there were bears and wolves there too. They had to wait there overnight in the freezing temperatures until the rescue party could reach them. Despite all of these problems, the mission was considered to have been a success, but it also marks the end of Russian dominance in the space race. 3 months later, the American Ed White completed his spacewalk in the Gemini capsule, and then 4 years later, NASA sent the first team to walk on the moon. Leonov returned to space in 1975 before retiring in 1992, and he produced some incredible artwork depicting his time in space. He died in 2019 at the age of 85. What an incredibly brave person! Like, it's insane to think that we were doing all of that before we had invented the internet, mobile phones, and air fryers. I am just so impressed. Oh, thank you so much for watching. Why not subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow.